What's it like to do play-by-play for the NFL, to never miss a game all season, and to be known to millions as the voice of a team? And how has the NFL changed over the last 3 decades? We'll find out when we're joined by Merrill Reese, the voice of the Philadelphia Eagles, coming up next on It's Your Call. It's football season, and whether you attend every game, watch on TV, or listen on the radio, I'm sure you're wondering what goes on behind the scenes and how those broadcasters are almost always right on with their play-by-play. Well, today we're going to find out. Hi there, everyone. It's good to have you with us. I'm Lynn Doyle, joined today by one of those broadcasters who has pretty much seen and called it all in the NFL over the last 3 decades. He's Merrill Reese, and he's been the play-by-play voice of the Philadelphia Eagles for over 30 years on CBS Radio and the Eagles Radio Network. He is also the author of the recently published book, Sportscasting, Turning Your Passion into a Profession, available now at merrillreese.com. Merrill, it is great to have you with us. I feel like I know you. I listen to you every week.
Well, I feel like I know you because I've watched you many, many times. You
must be the luckiest man in sports to be able to get paid to watch football. Do you feel that way?
I do. It's not my dream job, Lynn. A lot of people say you have your dream job. My dream job was to quarterback the team. But at 5'8" and 140 pounds, I'm not quarterbacking any teams. And if I had, my career would have been over decades ago. So yes, that being said, this is my dream job, and I love it now as much or more than I did when I started 105 years ago.
Oh, I doubt it's been that long. But you have seen a lot of changes from when you first started. Can you characterize the biggest difference in the NFL now than when your career first got started?
I think the whole marketing of the NFL, all the things attached to it. Teams now have huge marketing and promotion departments involving over 100 people. At the time, it was a job handled by 2 or 3 people. And of course, the whole commercialization of the NFL, that's different. The game itself has evolved into more of a passing, wide open game. But the athletes have not changed as much as people think. People think with all of the money and the million-dollar contracts that they must be so different. But what made a great NFL player back when I began in the late 1970s and what makes a great NFL player today is basically the same thing, and they all have to be dedicated, and they have to have a love for the sport, and they have to be enormously talented.
You know, I have to say I'm surprised by that answer, because I thought you were going to say that one of the biggest differences was the player.
The size of the player, the speed of the player, but not in here. The guys today are just as much fun to be around. They're good people. In fact, people tend to stereotype and they say, what is an NFL player like? And there's 53 of them, and they're all different, but there are a lot of wonderful guys.
Yeah, see, I guess what I was thinking of is, you know, in my era when I was a kid growing up, that, you know, players stayed with the team and they had a loyalty to that team and a passion for that team. They were, you know, either born a Baltimore Colt or they died a Baltimore Colt. And now we see a lot more transition and a lot more changing, I guess, because of career opportunities that didn't exist previously.
Well, and in those days, Lynn, a player didn't have a choice. There was no such thing as free agency.
Right.
So an owner could say to that player, either take my $10,000 or go back to the real world. Today there is, after a certain amount of time, there is free agency, so they can go on the open market. And it's today there are player agents, and there's a lot more involved. I know that the late Vince Lombardi supposedly called a guy by the name of Jim Ringo many years ago, a center, into his office, and Jim Ringo said, would it be all right if I have somebody represent me in this contract talk? And Vince Lombardi said, just a moment, Jim. And he walked into another room and then came back and said, Mr. Ringo, you've just been traded to the Philadelphia Eagles. So it's a different world.
They definitely took it as an offense if you wanted to have someone else represent you. I'm chuckling when you say $10,000. I mean, they get paid $10,000 a minute now. It's just unbelievable the amount of money that these athletes are making these days.
And it's unbelievable when you're talking about the television money and the broadcasting money. It's a much much bigger operation.
Are these guys,
billions of dollars involved in the Super Bowl.
Are these guys worth this money, though? $100 million for one of these players most recently?
You know, it's my theory, Lynn, that anybody who receives a certain amount of money is worth that money to the person paying it, whether it's in ratings, whether, I mean, look at the rock stars, look what they can make for an appearance, look what the movie stars can make for a picture. If that movie didn't remunerate the person producing it to a great extent, they wouldn't be paying it. Anything an athlete makes, when Peyton Manning will sign an enormous contract, when Tom Brady just got a big contract, that's because that contract is worth it to Robert Kraft, who owns the New England Patriots. He didn't do it just because he likes Tom Brady.
Well, I'd like to know what our viewers think about that. Tell me about these salaries that these athletes are being paid today, and whether or not you agree with what Merrill has to say. If you want to join in, we give you the opportunity to ask questions for Merrill. If you want to know what he thinks about the Eagles and the NFL for all this year, you can do that. If you want to know about sportscasting, or if you have an interest in that, maybe for yourself, your child, or your grandchild, you can ask him about that. He's going to answer all of that and much more. You can email me directly right now at lynn@lyndoyle.net. And as always, you can find us on Facebook, MySpace, and YouTube. We have a lot of response already to that question that I placed on Facebook, and we're going to pose those questions to Merrill in just a second. But go ahead and I'll let you finish that thought.
I was just going to say, I learned a long time ago that people aren't paid based on what they are worth to society. Teachers are worth much more than performers. The law enforcement people, the policemen, the fire people who protect us, they're worth a lot more than people who can carry a football or shoot a basketball. But it's a business, and you learn that it's strictly these are all business decisions.
I know when you put it that way, it does make sense, but there are times that I'm sure the rest of society is like me. They just look and they say, you must be kidding. These guys are playing a game. And yes, I do know that they're bringing in the money, just like as you said, the actors bring in for films or the musicians bring in for a rock concert. But sometimes you just look at the disparity between a school teacher or a police officer, and you just throw your hands up and say, maybe that's what's wrong with us today.
Well, and that being said, they are also taking an unbelievable risk.
This is true.
That any game could be their last game, that their careers do not have longevity. Someone once said NFL means not for long. and that's the truth. And then you hear about stories like Kevin Turner, who was an Eagles fullback back in 1999, now suffering the effects of symptomatically ALS, which they say came from repeated head blows. And it's a tough sport. If you see anybody who goes out there to two-a-days, 2 practices a day, heavy pads, hard hitting at training camp, over 100 degrees at Lehigh University where the Eagles train, or any of the other camps in the NFL, and the pounding they take and what they go through, it's got to be more than money, because other than that, it is pure agony.
It's because they have a passion for it, much like you have a passion for the sportscasting.
And nobody hits me in the booth.
Not that we know of, not that we see. But we heard Merrill say NFL stands for not for long for some. It doesn't stand for that when it comes to him. He has had the longevity that we all wish that we have in a career. When we come back, we're going to find out about that long career and some of the highlights and lowlights, and he'll tell you how you can make this a profession for yourself if you're interested. All that and more when It's Your Call continues.